please start by just stating and spelling your full name for the record?
Nakia Svoboda.
Thank you. Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Nakia.
Good morning.
Could you move that microphone up there to your mouth there? Good. All right. Speak clearly for us. A little soft-spoken. Thanks. Why don't you first tell us a little bit about yourself? How old are you?
22.
Where do you currently live?
On the southeast side of Cedar Rapids,
Where are you from originally?
Chicago.
How long have you lived in Cedar Rapids?
About 7 years.
Where else have you lived while you've been here in the area?
Iowa City.
Did you spend some time also living in Hiawatha in a trailer?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you know the defendant in this case, McKinley Louisma?
Yes, Your Honor.
You don't have to call me Your Honor. I'm not, that's him. I like it, but... So, can you tell us how you know Mr. Louisma?
I dated him.
And do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And can you just tell us what he's wearing?
A blue shirt.
Over here at the table by his lawyers?
Yes.
Okay. May the record reflect the witness identified the defendant, Your Honor?
It will.
So you said you dated Mr. Louisma. Can you tell us when you met Mr. Louisma?
In 2020.
Can you tell us how you met Mr. Louisma?
On a dating app.
On a dating app. Which one?
Tag.
When you met Mr. Louisma on a dating app, how did the initial conversation go?
We started talking and we gave each other our numbers in Snapchat.
And when you started talking with him after giving each other's numbers and talking on Snapchat, did you meet up with him?
Yes.
Did you meet up with him that day?
Yes.
And when you met up with him that day, what did the two of you do?
Went to Lily Pond Lake.
Is that the Lily Pond that's out up in Amana, down in Amana?
Yes.
And whose idea was it to go there?
His idea.
How much time did you spend together that first day?
Pretty much the whole day.
So did the two of you then hit it off?
Yes.
Did you start dating each other after that?
Yes.
And how long did you and Mr. Louisma then date each other or see each other as boyfriend and girlfriend?
Pretty much like every day.
Did that, how long did that last until?
This year.
Did it last until February of this year?
Yes.
During the course of your relationship, were the two of you together all the time, or were there times when you weren't?
There's times we weren't.
Would you call that an on-again or off-again relationship here and there?
Yes.
Did the two of you have some troubles during your relationship?
Yes.
What would you say were the main troubles you had during your relationship?
Arguments and keeping jobs.
Arguments and what?
Keeping jobs.
Keeping jobs? Okay. Was it difficult during the relationship for you and him to keep a job?
Yes.
Did that cause some problems with you guys?
Yes.
And when you had arguments, what were the arguments about?
Basically jealousy.
Was Mr. Louisma jealous of you talking to other people?
Yes.
During the relationship, would he keep tabs on who you were talking to in any way?
Objection, relevance.
Approach.
Thank you.
Objections overruled. You can answer if you remember the question, or do you need him to ask it again? Do you need him to ask it again? Okay.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Question. During the relationship, would he keep tabs on who you were talking to in any way?
No.
No?
No.
Did you and the defendant end up splitting up sometime in the middle of 2023?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember when it was the two of you broke up?
July
Do you remember the day?
4th.
So July 4th, 2023, you and the defendant split up?
Yes.
And who broke up with who?
Me.
So you broke up with Mr. Louisma.
Yes.
And was that because of the jealousy issues and whatnot?
Yes.
After you and Mr. Louisma broke up, did you start seeing somebody else?
Yes.
Who?
Matthew Clark.
And his last name was Clark?
Yes.
Did he go by any other names?
Polo King.
Polo King? How long did you see Mr. Clark?
Like 3 months.
And during that 3 months, did you continue to have contact with the defendant?
Yes.
What kind of contact did you continue to have with the defendant during that 3 months where you were seeing Mr. Clark?
I would text him and tell him to come get me at my apartment. And then we would meet up.
So what would be the purpose of you meeting up with him?
Because sometimes, most of the time, me and Matthew would get into it a lot.
So even though you were seeing this Matthew, you still continued to see the defendant off and on?
Yes.
While you were seeing Matthew and still seeing the defendant off and on, did you become aware of another person in the defendant's life named Melody?
No.
You didn't know about Melody at that time?
No.
Did Mr. Louisma, the defendant, ever tell you about having any other friends during that time that were
No.
women? At some point in time, did you and the defendant get back together as a couple?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
In December.
December of 2023?
Yes.
And how did that happen that you guys ended up getting back together?
I didn't know him and Melody were together, and he left Melody and came back to me.
So you didn't know that he had been with Melody, but are you saying that you know that now, that he left Melody and came to you?
Yes.
And when he came to you, who decided between the two of you that you would get back together as a couple?
We both did.
I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit here to February 17th, 2024, okay? What was the status of your relationship with the defendant on February 17th of 2024?
It was good.
Were you together as a couple?
Yes.
Were you living together at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you living?
At my nana's.
Your Nana's?
Yes.
Who's your Nana?
Patty.
What's Patty's last name?
Bent.
Sorry.
Bascom.
Bascom? And where was Patty's house where you were living?
Hiawatha.
Okay. Do you remember the name of the street you lived on?
No.
Do you know a street called Hummingbird Lane?
Yes.
Was that the street you guys lived on?
Yes.
And was that in a trailer park in Hiawatha?
Yes.
Who lived with you in your Nana, Patty Bascom, at this trailer?
McKinley and my papa.
Okay. Who's your papa?
I didn't really talk to them.
Okay. Was that your Nana's boyfriend at the time?
Yes.
Okay. So on February 17th, 2024, when you're living on the trailer on Hummingbird Lane with Patty, the defendant, and Patty's boyfriend, were you also pregnant at that time?
Yes.
And whose child were you pregnant with?
I didn't know who it was.
Did you believe it could have been the defendant's child?
Yes.
Was the defendant with you as a boyfriend at that time, taking care of you when you were pregnant?
Yes.
Was he going to, or keeping up on some of your appointments and things like that?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did the defendant believe the baby was his?
Objection,
Yes.
speculation.
Overruled.
And your answer to that was yes?
Yes.
I want to take you then to that day, February 17th, 2024, earlier in the day. Do you remember having some complications with your pregnancy?
Yes.
What was going on?
I have like really bad pain in my stomach, and I was sent to the hospital,
What hospital did you go to?
St. Luke's.
Who'd you go with to St. Luke's?
My nana.
Did she take you down there?
Yes.
What about the defendant? Did he come there that day?
Yes.
How did he get there?
Well, we called him, and he said he was with his brother, and then he came and he came by himself.
Okay. So he came by himself. Did he drive his car there?
Yes.
Do you remember how the defendant was acting when he came to St. Luke's that day?
Yes.
How was he acting?
Really off.
Off?
Yes.
In what way?
He wasn't himself, and I know when he is himself, he usually would talk to me, and he was on his phone, and I asked him if he was okay, and he didn't say anything.
So he was acting off, and he was on his phone. Could you tell anything he was doing on his phone?
No, he was watching videos.
So you could tell he was watching videos?
Yeah.
Could you tell if he was talking to anybody on his phone?
No.
So he was off enough that you asked him what was wrong with him?
Yes.
And he didn't tell you anything?
No.
I'm going to stop there for now on February 17th, but come back to that, to back up and ask you that after you got back together with the defendant at the end of December 2023, did you find out that he had been in a relationship with another woman while the two of you were not together as a couple?
I did find out.
And how did you find out the defendant had been in a relationship with another woman while the two of you were, separated from each other?
When we got back together. When we got back together at my apartment, she called his phone, and basically she said that I answered it, and she said she wanted to talk to her man, and I was like, "Who's your man?" And she said, "McKinley."
Okay. So, I'm going to ask a couple questions about that. You said at your apartment. What apartment were you living at?
Crestwood
And where's that?
on Edgewood.
Is that here in Cedar Rapids?
Yes.
When did you move out of that apartment?
In January.
So you were still at an apartment on Crestwood, on Edgewood Road in Cedar Rapids when this other woman called asking for her man.
Yes.
And did you find out who that woman was?
Yes.
Who?
Melody.
And do you know her now as Melody Hoffman?
Yes.
When you had this brief conversation with her, and she said McKinley, you asked her who her man was. What happened after that? What did you do?
I basically walked away because I couldn't deal with the stress.
So you were on the phone. What did you do with the phone?
I gave it back to him.
To the defendant?
Yes.
What did he do?
He hung up on her.
What happened after he hung up on her?
She called back.
Do you remember how many times she called back?
No.
What happened when she called back?
He put it on mute.
On what?
He put his phone on mute.
On mute?
Yes.
What does that do?
So she couldn't hear what we were saying.
So he answered the phone but then put it on mute?
Yes.
Were you present then while she was on the other end of the line?
Yes.
Did a conversation take place?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you what was said, but through the nature of that conversation, did you find out that the defendant had been in a relationship with her?
Yes.
And obviously, well, I guess not obviously, did you find out that the two of them had broken up?
Yes.
Did you also figure out then through talking to the defendant that while you were separated from him, that he actually had spent some time at Melody's apartment with her?
Yes.
Did you find out that he had some stuff there still?
Yes.
Do you remember when the defendant went to get some stuff from Melody's apartment?
Yes.
And were you with him that day?
Yes.
How would you describe the defendant's demeanor? I mean, like his emotions that day?
I don't really know. He just told me it was just a friend that he went to get his stuff from. And I waited outside the car.
Do you recall where his stuff was when he went over to get it?
No.
Do you remember any of his stuff being outside?
No. Not that I know. I only went there once.
Do you recall whether the defendant was upset when he went to get the stuff?
Yes.
How do you know he was upset?
He told me Melody's mom and him don't really get along.
So when he went over to get his stuff, Would you say that he was in an upset or angry mood?
Yes.
So, you had this brief conversation with Melody where you could tell that she and the defendant had been together while you guys were separated. And then there was the issue with him going to get his stuff. Did you find out from that point up until February 17th that the defendant was still talking to Melody on occasion?
I didn't even know.
I'm sorry?
I didn't know.
You didn't know?
No.
Did you have a feeling that he was talking to her?
Objection, relevant, speculation.
Sustained.
At any point in time, did you do anything on your own to try to see if he was still talking to her?
I usually went through his phone.
And when you went through his phone, did you see any evidence that he was talking to her?
No.
Did you ever see any conversations between the two of them? Or-
No. Not that I recall.
At any point in time, did you become aware that Melody was sending messages to the defendant that he wouldn't respond to?
No.
When you found out, well, let me back up here. In January then, when you found out that the two of them had been together as a couple, did you have any reason to believe he was still talking to her?
No.
Did you at any point in time tell the defendant that he couldn't talk to her?
I basically told him he had to choose between me or her.
And why did you tell him that he had to choose between you and her?
Because I wasn't going to be in the middle. I wasn't going to be like a second choice to somebody.
Why did you feel like you had to tell him that?
Because every time when she calls, it seems like a second choice to someone.
Every time what?
When she called his phone in January, it felt like a second choice. And I told him I wanted you to earn your trust back.
So it was the phone call that you talked about and finding out the two of them had been together as a couple and lived together that led you to tell him that he had to make a choice to be with either you or her.
Yes.
And when you told him that he had to make that choice, what was his response?
He said he picked me.
I want to go back to the night of February 17th, 2024. Do you remember being at your residence there on Hummingbird Lane with the defendant when he left for the night?
Yes.
Do you remember him leaving for the night?
Yes, I asked him where he was going. He said he was going to his parents.
And you know where his parents live?
Yes.
Where do they live?
164 Belvedere Drive.
Is that in Cedar Rapids as well?
Yes.
What side of town is that on?
The Northwest.
Is there a park or anything near that area?
Yes.
What park?
Cherry Hill.
And when he said he was going to his parents, did you have any reason to believe he wasn't?
No, I didn't.
I want to ask you a couple questions about him when he left. Do you remember what he was wearing when he left?
He had a ski mask with him.
He has a ski mask with him?
Yes.
Did that stick out to you, that he has a ski mask with him?
Yes.
Is there anything else he was wearing that stood out to you?
His boots.
What kind of boots?
His boots that he had for work.
What did those boots look like?
They're the black boots.
Was he wearing the boots or carrying with him?
Wearing them.
On or about this time period, so around February 17th of 2024, were the two of you tracking each other's locations by your phones?
Yes.
How were you doing that?
We have like 360.
Life 360?
Yeah, and Snapchat.
Is Life 360 an app where you can track the movements of certain people?
Yes.
And can you also track locations of people through the Snapchat app?
Say that again?
Can you also track the locations of people through Snapchat?
Yes.
Okay. And so were you able to do that with Mr. Louisma up to that time?
Yes, I tracked it, but then it turned off.
So at some point in time during the night, the location turned off?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember about what time that was?
I don't really remember.
Do you remember where he was before the location was turned off?
No.
So you just remember at some point in time you could watch him and then you couldn't?
Yes.
Did you try to contact him when the location was turned off?
It was going straight to voicemail.
When Mr. Louisma is not with you during your relationship and you try to call him, does he usually call you back?
Yes.
Did he do that call you back that night?
No.
Did he send you any messages at all?
No.
Were you able to find out, or did he turn his location back on at any time that night so you could see where he was?
Not that I know, because I went to sleep.
Okay. So at some point in time you went to sleep?
Yes.
When did you see the defendant again?
When he woke me up.
Okay. Do you remember approximately what time that would have been?
Like 4 in the morning.
So now we're at 4 a.m. on February 18th.
Yes. It was like 4, around 2, I think it was like 2 or 4.
So sometime around between 2 and 4 a.m.
Yeah.
What was he wearing when he came back?
I don't remember.
Did you see him with the ski mask when he came back?
No.
Did he acknowledge you when he came home?
Yes.
How?
He gave me a hug and a kiss. And he said he loved me.
What did you notice about him, if anything, when he gave you a hug and kiss and said, I love you?
He smelled like smoke, like black and mild, and it smelled like really off because he doesn't smoke black and mild. He doesn't even smoke.
So did you think that was strange that he smelled like smoke?
Yes.
Did you notice anything about his mannerisms?
He was sitting on the floor when he got back to my grandma's.
Sitting on the floor and doing what?
He was sitting on the floor watching a video, and I asked him what's wrong, and he said nothing.
Watching videos, how?
On his phone.
Did you notice anything about his person, like how he was acting at all?
He wouldn't say much.
Did he appear to be nervous at all or shaking or anything?
A little shaky.
Shaking? Did it stand out to you enough that you asked him what was wrong?
Yes.
Okay. And when you asked him what was wrong, what did he say?
He didn't say much. He didn't really say anything.
Does your Nana Patty have a son named Trevor?
Yes.
Did you have any knowledge that night that the defendant had gone and picked up Trevor from work?
Yes.
Besides that, did you know anything else that he did that night?
No.
Were you present at the Hummingbird Lane trailer when the defendant realized that his car was gone?
Yes.
Can you tell us, if you recall, how he was notified of that, or how you and Patty were notified of that?
We got a call from Marion Police Department, and my Nana woke us up and said, your car is gone.
So you got notified by the Marion Police Department they had his car?
We called, and they told us.
Okay. And after you found out that his car was at the Marion Police Department, what did you and the defendant do?
We dropped him off. We dropped him off because they wanted to talk to him, and so we dropped him off. And then the next, like 5 minutes later, we got pulled over,
Where'd you drop him off?
like up the street by the Marion Police Department.
So did you drop him off at the Marion Police Department?
Not right next to it, like up, like down by the gas station.
Okay. And after that, you said you got pulled over
Yes.
by a police officer?
Yes.
And at that point in time, did you talk to the police about anything?
They couldn't really say much. They just told us that they seen us drop him off.
Okay. At some point in time, did a police officer interview you about, some of the things we talked about here today?
Yes.
And then, do you remember coming into this courthouse and doing a deposition this summer?
Yes.
Just 1 second, Nakia. Excuse me, Your Honor. I just want to look for something really quick. Thank you, Nikki. I don't think I have any other questions at this time.
Cross?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
May I call you Nakia?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Nakia, you've told us today that you were pregnant last year. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you have your baby?
Yes, she's actually in the audience.
She's in the audience?
Yes.
When did you have her?
April 8th.
And what's her name?
Aaliyah.
How do you spell Aaliyah?
Aliyah.
And was she born well and healthy?
Yes.
And you were well and healthy after that?
Yes.
You mentioned that there was a time where you and McKinley had broken up. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you got back together.
Yes.
Now, before you had Aaliyah in April, there was some question as to whether McKinley or Matthew was the dad. Is that right?
Yes.
And that uncertainty, did that exist until Aaliyah was born?
Yes.
Did my question make sense? It wasn't worded very well.
Can you say that again?
I will. When did you determine who Aaliyah's dad was?
We sort of did like a DNA test.
And did you do that test after she was born?
We had DHS do it.
Pardon?
We had DHS do it.
Okay. And I'm just trying to figure out when you learned that information. Do you remember?
No, because we had to have DHS involved.
All right. Just to be clear then, McKinley didn't know for sure if he was the father of your baby for a time. Is that right?
Yes.
And in fact, McKinley is not Aaliyah's dad, correct?
We didn't, Matthew's not the father of Aaliyah.
Okay. And McKinley's not the father.
We haven't done a DNA test with McKinley.
When you got back together in December, you then talked about how in December and January you learned about Melody. Is that right?
Yes.
And you never met her, did you?
No.
And you gave McKinley an ultimatum. Yes?
Yes.
That he had to pick between you and her, right?
Yes.
You had some trust issues with McKinley when you got back together, is that right?
Yes.
And you told us that you would check his phone periodically?
Yes.
Now, after January, by the time we got into February, there were no issues with Melody at that point, correct?
No.
You also talked about a day where you and McKinley went over to get his things from Melody's house. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you testified that McKinley was angry?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I don't remember what your answer was. Were his things in the house or apartment or outside?
They were outside.
And he got his things that day, didn't he?
Yes.
Packed them up in the car?
Yes.
And once he got all of his things back, he wasn't angry anymore, was he?
Not that I know of.
You were with him, right?
I was only with him one time.
When he got his things, though.
The first time.
And after that, he wasn't angry about his things anymore, was he?
He was angry about getting the rest of them. He didn't get all of his stuff.
And eventually, when he did, he wasn't angry about that anymore,
No.
correct? No, he wasn't angry.
No, he wasn't.
Okay, thank you. And so by the time February rolled around, you did not believe or have any reason to believe that Melody was still in McKinley's life. Is that true?
Yes.
You explained to us how your Nana is Patty, correct?
Yes.
And that for a time you were living with her in Hiawatha,
Yes.
and so was McKinley.
Yes.
And at some point, let me back up. Do you know someone named Logan Kimpton?
Yes.
How do you know Logan?
He's a friend.
Would he sometimes stay at your Nana's?
Yes.
At one point, Logan gave your Nana a machete. Is that right?
Yes.
For protection.
Yes.
And your Nana accepted it, correct?
Yes.
And then she put it in a closet.
Yes.
And as far as you know, that's where it stayed.
Yes.
And before this date in February, you'd seen a McKinley before with a machete, correct?
Yes.
You'd keep one in his car for protection?
Yes.
And there were times, Nakia, where you would try to reach McKinley by cell phone and you weren't able to. Is that right?
Yes.
Not just on February 17th and 18th, correct?
Yes.
And McKinley's cell phone didn't always have internet access, correct?
Yes.
It would depend whether or not he could access a Wi-Fi connection. Is that true?
Sometimes he didn't pay it.
And sometimes whether or not he could use his phone would depend on whether or not he could hook up to, like, the library's Wi-Fi, correct?
Yes.
That night in February, you testified that you saw McKinley with a ski mask?
Yes.
You'd seen McKinley with a ski mask before that night, though, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Nakia. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect?
Yes. Nakia, I'm just going to ask you a little bit more about what Ms. Eimerman asked you about, learning about Melody, okay? Do you recall in your deposition back in July of this year that you were asked about whether or not you knew that the defendant and Melody were talking?
Say that again?
Do you recall being asked if you knew whether the defendant and Melody were talking, like when you guys were together?
I didn't even know.
You didn't know, but do you
No.
recall being asked that question?
Yes.
Do you recall what your answer was?
Yes.
Okay, what was your answer?
No.
No? Okay. Do you recall talking about seeing something on his phone and not wanting anything to do with it because of drama? It's yes or no question.
Overruled.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. What is it that you saw on his phone that you wanted to avoid because you didn't want the drama?
Objection, relevance?